they're quite happy to see Trump in the White House. Yeah, look, are they controlling us? Who knows, possibly, but
now is the time where we're at a point where there's lots of uncertainties.
They've made their bet and they're aligning themselves with Trump.
Speaking about the Trump coin, I mean, like, this is just another tactic, right, in terms of using his current the publicity.
Crypto has come along, the first time we've seen a pro-crypto president.
What's your feelings around Musk coming into play? How much influence will Musk have on Trump's decision making?
He's clearly decided that this is an ally that I want. He's clearly, his influence not just in a US level, at a global level, is increasing. We've seen Mark Zuckerberg, we've seen Jeff Bezos. You know, there's very clearly big tech is saying we want to be in this, guys.
Having two of the biggest social platforms rubbing shoulders with Trump, does that then sway people's opinions? Are they able to control people's opinions more on that basis? Like, I mean, what's your opinion around, you know, the Chinese kind of US tensions and what's going to come of that, and what potential impact can that have on the markets? We haven't seen the knock-on effect yet in Europe, right?
But it does feel like that's a space that looks very interesting.
What stocks are you kind of looking at the moment?
Certain stocks do better, certain stocks do worse. And clearly the start of this...
Welcome to Two Blokes Trading. I'm your host, Jonathan Farrelly, and I'm delighted to be back in the hot seat. It's took a little bit longer than expected to release the new season, guys, but we've been working tirelessly in the background with our app. It's now out of beta stage. We've got new user interfaces, we've got some AI tools, and some really exciting stuff coming, so watch this space. So we're delighted to have Aiden O'Donnell on with us today. Aidan's got extensive experience in the financial markets as a research analyst, working for some of the biggest financial houses, such as Davies and Elkstone. He's also now set up his own business and working for Bespoke Technical Analysis. Welcome, Aidan.
Thank you, Jonathan. Great to be here.
Yeah,
excited to get on this journey.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time out today. Really appreciate it. So tell me a bit about your background, why you got into trading in the first place, some of your journey towards, you know, throughout your career, and how it's brought you to where you are now.
Sure. Yeah, as you say, I've been around the block a bit, probably nearly 20 years at this stage in terms of various roles within financial markets. Some of that's been on the research side, many years ago covering food and beverage companies, which is great fun. But my passion has always been for technical analysis and how charts and price interacts with stocks and securities and markets. And that's really been my passion. And that led me to setting up my own business nearly 10 years ago, Bespoke Technical Analysis, where we provide bespoke research to a range of clients, all driven through the vista of price and charts. So very much centered on that part of the market.
Awesome. So I suppose what piqued your interest in terms of getting into the markets in the first place? Like, why did you want to become a research analyst and trader?
Yeah, it's look, I've always been interested in markets. I recall when I was in school buying my first share in 1998. So I've always had an interest.
1998,
1998, yeah, absolutely. That's aging me. But I've always had an interest. I'm interested mainly how stock prices move, why they move, what drives them. Some of that is fundamental, clearly. Some of it's technical, and really just trying to figure out why markets move in the way that they do and what makes them tick. So always been an interest, always been a passion, and obviously now we're into a kind of whole new world with, you know, where whether it's YouTube, Spotify, podcasts, there's just a whole more availability of content that's just fantastic for anyone looking at markets.
It's never been easier for people to get into it at this stage, especially as a retail trader. I mean, there's so much information out there at the moment. I suppose it's about getting the right information is the key, right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean, like, there's, as you say, there's hours and hours of YouTube content or podcasts that you can listen to. I think it was the Reid Hoffman from Netflix that talked about, you know, who are Netflix's big competitor, and his line is that their biggest contributor is sleep, and it's somewhat similar in the investment world. It's, you know, there's so much content, distilling it down to what's relevant, what's useful, and what's value add is really the trick. So hopefully in two traders here we can crack that nut.
100%. 100%. So I suppose you spoke about your own background. How when you're looking to I suppose take a trade, whether it's a stock pick or whatever the case may be, different traders have different styles. Some will look at technical only. Some will be like purely fundamental based, and others kind of a mix of the two, and also bringing in sentiment as well. You know, you kind of touched upon that you use both, but obviously your company name is Bespoke Technical Analysis. Is that your main focus?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I suppose I have I have an advantage. I think that in terms of my own background is deep fundamental analysis. Lots of the people that I interact with through work are fundamental analysts. So there's a very strong appreciation on my side that it's a really big part of the market. It's not to dismiss it, not to just focus on one particular area, and like that's definitely something for someone starting out, that you have to have that appreciation of both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be and as opposed to and or when you're looking at these things. So from my perspective, I probably lean further or closer to the chart side of things and what price is doing. But I'll rarely deviate. I'll rarely do that without at least having some understanding on the fundamental side and trying to build that into the process.
Sure. I mean, the beauty of having understanding of fundamentals and sentiment is you're building an internal bias. You're not going to wait before we even get to the charts, really, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think that kind of fundamental knowledge can be both a bit of a double-edged sword, in that it's great to have the information. Sometimes you can have too much information, and there are countless examples where you can know everything about a company and still make the wrong decision from an investment point of view. So it's really trying to, I suppose ultimately you're trying to, if you're putting on a trade, you're trying to do it, whether it's a stock or an index, a currency, a commodity, you're trying to do it for the right reason, but also then at the right time, because the better your timing, the higher probability of success. And I think that's an important part of the toolkit.
100%. So while we have you, let's pick your brains as much as we can, right? So I suppose, first of all, we can't really talk about much without speaking about Trump. I mean, the implications on the markets at the moment with Trump coming into power, what do you believe is going to be the main issues and maybe the main positives and benefits of Trump coming into power?
Yeah, well, I think, the market is, a phenomenal, as we know, discounting machine, and it's generally forward looking. So you could tell quite early in late October, early November, that the market had begun to price that Trump was going to win. We obviously saw when he was elected, you got the really big move, particularly in US assets initially, and that was clearly the market voting that they're quite happy to see Trump in the White House. Because of, again, we've probably had the template from the 2016 period where he was very pro-business, pro-growth, pro-America, and we've seen that filter through into markets, and obviously not just the prices, but there's also kind of a animal spirits type reaction where people are keen to get money into the market, keen to invest, and that's so far has been positive, because clearly we've had a strong move in most major indices since election. Clearly, there's positives and negatives to the election, to Trump. There, it's not all going to be brilliant. We've seen some companies do very well where it's been very pro-Trump, but clearly on the other side, there's been really big reversals in areas where he's not so positive, whether that's renewable energy, or clearly his tariffs. Talking of tariffs on various countries has been caused issues there.
Moving on to tariffs, I mean, we haven't seen the knock-on effect yet in Europe, right?
No, I mean, and again, it hasn't maybe been the main talking point that Europe, it hasn't been the one where he's gone for first. Clearly, overnight, he's talking about, strong tariffs on Canada and Mexico because of their immigration stance. The big unknown is whether all the tariff talk, whether his bark is going to be worse than his bite. That's yet to be seen. So I think there's a lot of to and fro before we really get the reaction. But I guess the only important thing is all of these tariffs and whatever political or economic changes that he's putting through, um, they're not operating in a vacuum. Companies are still going to produce units, they're still going to produce the widgets, and the world will continue to spin. It might be different, it might be a little bit more difficult, but as we've seen over the course of many years, the best companies will still operate irrespective of who's in the White House, and all the other wall of worry type things that we see. The best companies figure out a way of getting through that. So hopefully that's what we will continue to see.
And what's your feelings around Musk coming into play? I mean, how much influence will Musk have on Trump's decision making?
I mean, the early signs are that he'll have a lot. So obviously, he, made that play quite early last year in terms of, aligning himself with, at that point, the candidate Trump. Clearly had a really big influence on him getting across the line in terms of the association that he brought. So the early signs are he will have a big influence. Whether how we see that or how that manifests itself is yet to be seen, and we may never see it. But he's clearly decided that this is an ally that I want, from Musk saying that about Trump. And again, he's clearly, his influence not just in a US level, on a global level, is increasing. And it's been quite a while since we've seen some sort of a figure like him. And what it does is now it adds probably some spice to the market. It adds some volatility, and maybe the combination of both of them, I would think that's going to continue as the year progresses, where if you recall from 2016, the first piece of President Trump's, at that point, his presidency was all about the influence of tariffs in China. And there was huge headline risk at that time, which caused lots of ups and downs for a range of assets. And it feels like we might enter that sort of phase again, where we see, based on what he's saying, more and more movements around that. In regards to Musk, it's not just Musk that has cozied up. We've seen Mark Zuckerberg, we've seen Jeff Bezos. There's very clearly big tech is saying we want to be in this guy's camp.
I was just about to mention that to you. I mean, having two of the biggest social platforms rubbing shoulders with Trump, does that then sway people's opinions? Are they able to control people's opinions more on that basis?
Oh, this is probably a different type of podcast we should be on for some sort of deep mind and how that influences. But look, there's undoubtedly, like, media is different than it was 30 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, and definitely 100 years ago. But look, over the history of media, the biggest powers have tried to control it, and it's no different in the social media age that we have two of the biggest, as you say, two of the wealthiest US citizens aligning themselves alongside the president. Obviously, Jeff Bezos has a different type of media exposure through the Washington Post, but again, they're all cozying up.
They're good all allies.
Controlling. Huh? And look, that can change, obviously, if there's a reason to change. But for now, it's very much they've made their bet and they're aligning themselves with Trump. And yeah, look, are they controlling us? Who knows? Possibly, but again, that's probably for a different podcast. Yeah.
Another day. So tell me, looking at the US-China tensions, where, lots of things can go wrong here. Obviously, we've seen DeepSeek. There's other things going on. There's lots of things that can really catapult the market. There's lots of, I suppose, in trying to find stabilization in trading, now is the time where we're at a point where there's lots of uncertainties. Like, I mean, what's your opinion around, the Chinese kind of US tensions, and what's going to come of that, and what potential impact can that have on the markets? In
terms of the market implication for China and the US, clearly there's a huge political football being played between both nations. It does seem like there's a technological arms race that's being played, and who knows who's going to win out there. But I suppose from a trading perspective and a market perspective, when you take it back to that, and that's probably how I would judge most of these things, China's actually been very strong since Trump was elected. A little bit of weakness initially, But then we've had a strong rally in Chinese assets, and more recently, obviously, on the news of DeepMind, you've seen a resurgence in the likes of the big caps in China like Alibaba and Baidu have been quite strong. So, I think sometimes you can dig too much into is this positive or negative for asset A or asset B, and instead focus on what the price is actually doing. And so far, and again, it's a short window to judge it on over only really kind of a month or 2 months, but so far Chinese assets have rallied. Again, China's not operating in a vacuum in terms of, yes, there may be pressure coming from the US, but they've also got their own levers to pull, and they're seem to be very intent on trying to get their own economy moving and get out of the slump that they've been in for a number of years. So again, probably wouldn't be, from a more of a trading or market perspective, less focused on maybe the noise that we're seeing at a headline level and more focused on what we're seeing at a price level. And thus far, and as I say, a short window, but thus far, price seems to be telling you that Chinese assets are actually either improving or certainly making a shape to improve.
Sure. I suppose to finish up on Trump, we can't really finish without speaking about the Trump coin. I mean, this is just another tactic, right, in terms of using his current, the publicity that's around him at the moment to I suppose, really take advantage of his position, right?
Yeah, and again, look, definitely no expert on altcoins and how they're created or how they trade. It seems like very much like the Wild West of the crypto space. But it just, again, probably just shows that, markets have changed considerably over, the last decade. Who would have thought, even in 2016 when he was elected, that something like that would happen? So it just tells you that like markets are constantly evolving. There are always new assets. If you look at the price performance of what the Trump coin did, it obviously went up a lot to start, but that has fizzled out pretty quickly. So, the market has done a pretty good job of, seeing through whether this is real or not. I suppose on the more wider Bitcoin or crypto piece, Trump has again, really aligned himself as being pro that space, pro digital currencies, pro blockchain. Again, whether he delivers on all of that remains to be seen. But from a kind of more macro backdrop, he certainly has. It's the first, I would say, since crypto has come along, the first time we've seen a pro crypto president, and I guess it's again probably a soft positive for that as we look forward.
Sure. I wanted to mention, we had a chat before we jumped on the podcast, and we were chatting about these new Meta glasses. Something I wanted to kind of have a chat with you a bit more in depth about. I know you're saying that one of your friends sent you some images and things. Tell me a bit more about the product.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's interesting. I've kind of followed the story a little bit over the last while. I'm not an owner yet, but of the glasses, but I thought it was interesting. Meta reported their results 2 nights ago, and they looked like they were pretty strong. But in the fourth paragraph of their earnings release, they mentioned the Meta glasses, and they talked it up as being, potentially that they would eventually sell billions of these glasses. And I just thought it was very interesting that it featured so highly on the earnings report and the press release. They clearly see a big market for that space, and it does feel like it's an evolution of another evolution of that technological space, where we've gone from phones, we've gone to AirPods, and now the glasses piece looks like it's another potential very interesting space. What it's going to be, I think, is very difficult to tell, as we've kind of talked about. At the moment, it looks a very basic technology. You can take photos, you can record video. There's some other cool little features. But I guess, like a lot of these things, I mean, certainly on my end, not qualified to see the future as to what it could be. But it does look like it's a space that's going to continue to be invested in. And yeah, I think there's definitely some interesting out there ideas that could be there.
Surely this is kind of a gateway back towards the metaverse that he put so much money into, right?
Yeah, and again, obviously at that point, even just the statement of changing the name of the company from Facebook to Meta was big, and clearly not something I'm sure that was done on a whim. The metaverse, when it was very much laughed at almost in the early days, it's still very much concept. I think concept type phase, but in terms of its impact, certainly from a meta perspective, in terms of profitability, it's not a big part of the story at all. It's still very much in the investment stage. But I guess again, we're just not well positioned here to figure out, is this the early days of something much bigger, or is it something that's just a flash in the pan? But on the glasses side, that's much more tangible. Obviously, sales have been pretty good in the States. It's not as big a deal yet in Europe, but it does feel like that's a space that looks very interesting, and yeah, definitely one to watch as we go forward. How that gets in, how much more of we see of that product, and yeah, I think it's definitely something to keep an eye out on.
Absolutely. Like, all the earnings are being released as well at the moment. Stocks are, especially tech stocks, are staying strong. What stocks are you kind of looking at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, we've earnings season has obviously kicked off kind of big time last week with the banks coming out, starting it off, and those numbers were pretty well received. Most of the banks are higher since then. This week we're moving into some of the mega caps. We've obviously seen Meta, we've seen Intel, Apple last night. So so far they've been well received. In terms of what names that look interesting, there's definitely still feels like there's an appetite for most of those big tech names. The stocks are higher post numbers, suggesting that there's still very much a willingness to stay involved in that space. But it's changing. You can see each quarter there's almost a weeding out process of certain stocks do better, certain stocks do worse. And clearly the start of this week was very volatile, where we saw a big shift in semiconductors, where that sector, as a result of the DeepSeek news, we saw a big sell-off there. Early days, could it be a changing of the guard from semis into maybe software, where you're moving from the enablers of the AI trade to the end users of the AI trade? Look, we don't know. That happened on Monday. It's Friday today.
You're always going to get a knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, so it could be, as you say, it could be just a knee-jerk reaction. But it does make you think that, look, there will be different phases to this cycle. So I think there's still, when you look across the market, there's still a world of opportunity. There's still, it feels like there's a willingness. There's still capital coming into the sector. There's into the market more generally. But for now, it's very broad-based. I mean, you have JP Morgan trading at all-time highs, and you have Meta trading at all-time highs. So it shows you that it's not just a tech story. There's more going on there too. So yeah, it's nailing down to one or two names. I think it's more just keep focused on where the price is and how things are moving. And I think, as I said, it's so far it's been nice and broad.
Sure, and it's great that you be sharing some of your analysis in the app as well, helping us out a bit, maybe sharing some of your portfolio knowledge, and obviously potentially offering some mentorship as well to anyone coming through the process. Let's quickly move on to some commodities. Gold is all-time highs, working around that, just below that 2.8 level. If it breaks that resistance, I can really see potentially a strong push from there if it can hold above it. Otherwise, further sideways action potentially.
Yeah, I mean, look, momentum has been good. It has, as you say, it's got up to that all-time high. Probing through it, you're seeing some strength also in silver, which is complementary, I guess. So yeah, I mean, again, it looks like it wants to go higher. That's certainly the path of least resistance at the moment. I think one of the kind of really interesting pieces of gold making a new all-time high is probably how little coverage there has been of gold making a new all-time high.
Yeah.
So that in itself is, I think, a positive, in that it's getting there without so much fanfare. if you go back to like kind of previous gold cycles, it was, you know, every second person was talking about how to buy some gold. Clearly haven't seen that. Now, that is likely to be a function of, because I think every second person at the moment is trying to buy Bitcoin or something else. So it just, again, the landscape has changed a bit, but certainly encouraging that it's continuing higher. How it ends up, we wait and see, but certainly the path of least resistance looks to be higher just now. On a more broader level in commodities, I mean, it's been a really challenging few years across the board, where obviously we had a big bit of inflation. Then you had big sell-offs in most of the, whether it's agriculture or even in oil, where they've come back down. That's sort of softened out a bit now, so there's probably less going on in oil and some of the energy commodities, and obviously maybe precious metals has taken up some of the momentum in that group. So, but look, we know from commodities it tends to be a volatile space. You get some really nice short and long-term trends that do emerge, and would certainly be over the next little while be trying to spot some of those as we move through the app and
as we
podcast.
navigate the markets.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, look, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a real pleasure, and we'll certainly look forward to getting you back at some stage soon as well. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us, and we'll see you next week.